It has been 9 years since my wife and I got married. I think these were the best years of my life. A beautiful house was built by us both together, and it was a joy to live in it. I had the pleasure of having a very cute daughter. My wife and I were in the middle of a normal routine when our life was turned upside down by a nasty act on her part. For more stories like this, make sure you hit the bell icon and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out. A parent-teacher meeting was held at my daughter's school just a couple of months ago. It was our daughter's teacher who revealed to us of the hidden natural talent our daughter had for playing the piano. We were surprised by this, which was something we did not expect. Our aim was to find a teacher who would be able to teach her music. Our neighbor recommended me to a new music school graduate who had just graduated. His son was being taught piano by him. He gave me his number and we hired him as soon as we got it. In order to improve my daughter's musical skills, he started teaching her music lessons. The time of his class was in the afternoon. He started packing up his stuff as soon as I got home from work. It was very rare for us to interact with each other. There were very few encounters between us. 2 weeks ago, I noticed that his behavior had changed in a very strange way. At the time I met him at my house, he was a bit nervous, or like he did not expect me to be there at this time. There was no doubt that my daughter was learning piano in a good way. The level of my daughter's performance in playing the piano was improving day by day, so I was also appreciating the teacher's efforts. When I was hanging out one Sunday, when I got back to my house after going to the gym, I found him in the living room. Due to the fact that Sunday is a holiday, I asked him why he was still here even though it is a holiday. As per his explanation, he does not have anything to do at home or has any other plans, so he thought it would be a good idea to give my daughter a class. On that particular day, I ignored him completely. However, after that day, I could tell that my wife's behavior had changed somewhat in terms of the way she behaved towards me. The distance between her and me started to grow. I used to talk to her about my day every day, but now she is always on her cell phone, talking about whatever she's doing. A part-time job was being held by my wife at the time. Therefore, I did not disturb her by asking foolish questions, since I know that she will be loyal to me no matter what happens. I had not questioned her about anything in particular. She quit her job a few days after she took those piano classes. I was unable to figure out what the exact reason was for it since she did not tell me. However, she only stated that she wanted to get a job in the morning. When the music teacher came to the house, my wife was usually at home. We were having dinner at that time while it was still late at night. It is also worth noting that my wife's mobile phone was on the table on my right side. When my wife went to the kitchen for the truffle dish, she received a message on her cell phone. Although I have not picked up the phone yet, I can see the notification of the message that was sent. It was an emoji of a heart. It was a red flag to me, so I picked up her cell phone and tried to open it. However, I was unable to do so as it was face-locked. It was another surprise that I received within a few minutes. Previously, she had not even put a password in her cell phone or set a pattern for it. As a matter of fact, I found it to be quite astonishing. As soon as she arrived back home, I did not say anything to her. I just told her that your phone rang. I found her face expressions to be so strange when she picked up her cell phone and looked at it. The expressions on her face changed in a matter of seconds. A look was exchanged between her and I before she placed the cell phone in a drawer next to me. Despite the fact that I am not a psychiatrist, I am able to predict that she was fearful of something. In order to get to sleep, we both get into the bed. My conversation with her began with a casual discussion of her day. I noticed that her voice was a little bit distorted, which was an absolute proof that she was doing something wrong. I then asked her why she had put a face lock on her cell phone and why she thought it would be a good idea to do so. In the midst of speaking, she paused for a moment. Afterwards, she said she was doing something in the setting and somehow she set the lock unintentionally by mistake. Afterwards, she fell asleep and awoke in the morning. There was something strange about the fact that she was a well-educated woman. I don't know how she didn't know about it. Besides this, it was also one of those times when I got back just half an hour earlier than usual. When I arrived home from work, I found my wife sitting nearby that piano where that teacher and my daughter were practicing. There seems to be a sort of glow radiating from my wife's face. This is something that has been going on for the past few weeks. During the time that I was wondering what exactly was going on with her, I had a headache. Could she be cheating on me? Is she having an affair with someone? Has she stopped loving me so much as she used to do? Is there someone she's found? It is all those questions that are circling around in my head at the moment. It is not possible for me to accuse her directly. It wasn't easy for me to do this. It occurred to me that I should do something on my own. It was obvious that she was meeting someone, so I followed her. My main focus was to follow her for a few days and then I would be able to answer all my questions about her. I followed her for 3 days and it was all as normal as going to any friend's house and buying groceries. It was nothing out of the ordinary. It came to a point when I started to think perhaps I was thinking so negatively about it that maybe I was imagining those things too much. In the middle of narrating a bedtime story to my daughter, she said this to me: "As of now, Mom can also play the piano on her own." The first thing that comes to my mind is that, is it a normal thought? It was only then that I asked her a few questions that she answered. As a matter of fact, she said that teacher also taught her mother how to play the piano. According to her, she saw her mother playing the piano while she sat on his leg. As I was listening to the words of my daughter, I was triggered and I got a glimpse of why she was acting in that manner. In the end, I connected all the dots and came to the conclusion that she was having an affair with a piano teacher. There was no doubt in my mind about that. However, I felt so broken that I could not move forward. In my opinion, divorce is a necessity, but if I were to let her go in such a manner, would it be right? It was then that I told myself that I could not forgive her. However, I could get revenge on her. My temper had overtaken me, so somehow I was able to control myself and refrain from going to my bed with her. The idea of sleeping with a cheater is unimaginable to me. Consequently, I started sleeping in a different room right after the room where my daughter slept. During that night, I had what could only be described as a nightmare. During that night, the most possible consequences were coming into my mind as I lay in bed. If I divorced my wife, what would happen to my daughter if I did so? There is one more thing we have to do to break up this family. We have to sell this house that we both created through our hard work, but we have to do that. I felt like I was in a psycho. It was the fact that she tried to betray me that was one of the biggest grievances I had in my heart. I had never thought of this. As a result, everything has been changed within a matter of hours. I heard my wife knocking on the door next morning. It was a strange feeling when I opened it, and I was extremely serious. I was barely holding myself together to stay calm, but at any moment that bomb could explode. Suddenly, I saw my daughter and my heart melted. As soon as I finished breakfast with my daughter, I told my wife that I was going to drop my daughter off at school. And I did not respond to her. As a matter of fact, it was she who dropped her off on a daily basis. I think She was also aware that there was something wrong with me at the same time. As soon as I returned home, she asked me what happened last night. The only excuse I can come up with is that there is too much work to do. Now that I had made up my mind, I was ready to act. The other day I went to the market and bought some spy cameras and microphones that I could use in the future. After returning home, I hid them in the garage as soon as possible. Eventually, I was able to install them, and it was only a matter of time before I was able to do so. Next morning, when our daughter was being picked up from school by her mother, I quickly set up all those cameras and microphones. As of now, all that needs to be done is to monitor what was going. Checking the recordings was something I did every day, and I had never seen any suspicious behavior, such as anything might be considered intimate. Consequently, as my wife gave her cell phone to my daughter, I was able to see my wife and that piano teacher talking and holding each other's hands. As a bribe, she might let her play a game or do whatever she wants in exchange for playing games. Nevertheless, it wasn't enough for me, so I waited for another couple of days to see what would happen. During those days, I spent most of my time working on the paperwork associated with divorce and custody of my daughter. However, the recordings were checked on the 6th day of the trip when I returned home. The recordings I found in my bedroom were made during the time when they were having physical relations in my bed. The whole thing was expected of me, but honestly the most painful part of the whole thing was that my wife was talking to her fair partner and laughing at my loyalty and telling him that she married a simp, which was the most painful part of the whole thing for me. I'm in a rage of fire when I read these words. There is no way I can forget it. Nevertheless, I made a promise to myself that no matter what she did in the past, I will make her regret it. There will be a lot of begging from her on my part. I have scheduled a party for my house on the upcoming Sunday. I had a very large gathering in which I invited a lot of friends and neighbors. I also invited that piano teacher to join us as well. His first attempt at refusing was to try as hard as he could. Then I said that I know a few people who were also seeking for a piano teacher for their children, and I suggested that we talk about it. As I explained to him, he might be able to get a few more jobs as a result of this opportunity. In the end, he agreed to the proposal. The reason I dropped my daughter off at my sister's house is because I don't want her to see everything through her eyes, and I didn't want her to get mental disturbances from seeing it. At that time, we were sitting in the hall when all the guests arrived, so I asked him to play a piece of music for us on the piano, which he did. It was then that he began to play light music for the audience. It was then that I suddenly asked him to play that music as he and my wife played on our bed when we both were in bed together. It was a shock to everyone to hear what I was saying. It was my wife who held my arm and asked me what was wrong with me. Are you sure that you haven't forgotten that? Please don't worry. I'll remind you about that. As soon as I played the video, I could see my wife and that music teacher in bed together. The hall was silent for a few minutes after that. My wife was in tears as she begged me to stop those videos, while tears were running down her cheeks, and everyone was in the shock. All of the people went back to their houses after a while. I stopped that piano teacher and talked to him for a while. It had been 3 hours since she spoke that night, and there was a silence in the house. I had told my wife that she said that night, "I am a simp." I laughed and then told them to do the same thing in front of me that they had done. When my wife refused, I blackmailed her and warned her that I would send that video to her mother if she refused. After crying for a long time, she finally agreed to do that. The piano boy was frightened, but I also forced him to do it because he was so afraid. As far as I am concerned, if a woman was in bed with another man in front of her husband, then that would be the worst thing that could happen in her life. This piano teacher then left after that. Anyhow, she was beseeching me to forgive her, but then I smashed those divorce papers right in her face, and then she cried. I told her to leave that house as soon as possible, as she said it was also her house. Then I told her not to worry about it, she'd receive the part of the money. Although she was still inside my house at the time, I kicked her out of it soon after. I received a call from my neighbor the next day, and he apologized for me for recommending that music teacher to me. It was his job to ensure that whoever hired that teacher based on his recommendation would fire him as soon as possible. A short time later, I filed a petition for custody of my daughter against her, and she won the case. Anyway, I managed to win the case in the end. In those days, I felt like I was going through hell all the time. However, now I have moved on from everything and I am looking forward to the future. My daughter and I are living a very beautiful life together, and it is very fulfilling for me. While my daughter sometimes missed her mom, I was always there for her when she needed me. I tried my best to do everything in my power to make her happy.